Hello and welcome to today's episode of On the Line with ZYouth. My name is Derek Crawford and I'm the youth pastor at Zion Lutheran Church in Clear Lake, Iowa. Let me give you a quick rundown to those who are new to this space. Over the next few minutes, we are going to explore some areas and topics of Christianity, then break them down a little bit and hopefully apply them back to our daily lives. Let's check it out. So in the previous videos, we've been establishing what the kingdom of heaven looks like, and we've been providing some background information. We were giving you context, and then we kind of set up the tension that was happening. And today, I think it's going to kind of start to point where this is headed. What is this leaning towards, or what direction are we being pushed towards? And I chose the verses that I did to have you read because I think they are the ones that kind of begin with this sentence: the kingdom of heaven is blank. The kingdom of heaven is for blank. And in 13, I told you Matthew 13, what it kind of started to show is that the kingdom of heaven is the most valuable thing in the world. Like, there's nothing greater, there's nothing more valuable than the kingdom of heaven. It has so much value to it. And yet, it costs us nothing. And I think that's important as we move to this next section, which is what I'm actually going to focus on today in the second half of 19. But I think that's an important thing to look at, is this idea of that the kingdom of heaven is valuable. It's something that is so important that you should be willing to give up everything you have. Your money, your time, your energy, everything you have to chase after it, to be a part of it, to be invited into it. And I think that's kind of what those verses were kind of talking about. And I hope you caught that when you were reading it. And if not, go back and see if you can see that reading it through a second time. But we're gonna jump ahead to verse 19. And last week we talked about divorce, and that was the first part of chapter 19. And but I think if you look at that and then add in the next two sections, I think it is also pretty important. And so anyway, the next section talks about what the kingdom of heaven is for. And in this section, basically he mentions that the kingdom of heaven is for the children. And what's interesting about this is that the children at this time, children in this setting, would have been considered the lowest of the low. They would have been low man on the totem pole. They would not have had status. They would not have had power. They would not have had much rights at this time until they became adults. And so they would have been considered very marginalized. And basically what Jesus was saying in these verses is he basically said the kingdom of heaven is for them. And I think what your brain probably jumps to is this idea of like, well, it's for children, as like an age thing. And what I'm thinking it's probably more of is this idea that that we need to view God in the eyes of a child. A child is dependent on their father. They're dependent on their parents. And, they approach them with that idea that I need you to survive. And I think that's kind of the humility that we're asked to approach our Heavenly Father with. If we approach things with the idea that we deserve it, or that we have earned it, or that anything like that, I think that kind of goes against this kingdom nature he's trying to describe. And so when it talks about that the kingdom of heaven is for the little children, one, it's a perspective thing. So it's the idea that the children are looking at God with the eyes of like he is their father. And that's the humility that they present themselves with. The other aspect I think that is at play here is that because they are the low man on the totem pole, because they are the low of the low, it is helping us establish the character and nature of God. Basically, it's showing that God isn't necessarily interested about who's the most popular. He isn't interested in who is the most famous or who is the best, who's at the top. He's more interested about the marginalized, the people that are the victims, the people that are the poor, the needy. That's who he has a heart for. That's who he chases after. And I think it's that perspective thing, that idea of the people that need liberation, those people that can turn to God and give him nothing but praise and adoration. And I think that then plays in well with the next section. As you jump down, it starts talking about the rich young ruler. And basically how this story works is a rich young ruler basically comes to God, or comes to Jesus and says, how do I get salvation? How do I get to heaven, basically? And Jesus replies, he replies them back to Deuteronomy and basically says, you follow the commandments. And he named the commandments and basically says you got to love others and love God. And, the man replies like, yeah, I do that. I get that. I do those things. I follow that. Well, this man was rich and wealthy and and at this time he had a lot of possessions. And during that time, if you had a lot of possessions, that meant you had status, you had power, you had authority. It wasn't just that you had money. Money was just a thing, but what that really translated into was power. And so basically Jesus kind of combats and kind of pushes it back and says, okay, well then what you need to do is you need to sell everything you have. Sell all your possessions and give that to the poor. And then the kingdom of heaven is yours. And he didn't want that. He went away sad. He went away upset. And I think there's two things to be pulled from this. One, it again shows God's character and nature because he has a mindset for the poor. Give to the poor, give to the needy, give to the marginalized people, similar to the last story. But it also shows that what Jesus is combating in this story is he's combating this nature of things that hold us back, the things that hold us down, the things that keep us from chasing God with all of our heart. And for this man, it was money. And does that say that everyone who has money, they need to go sell it off and give it to the poor? No, that's not what this story is saying. It's not what that means. What it's saying is that any sin that holds you down, anything that holds you back from chasing Jesus with all your heart, chasing after him with all your heart, soul, and mind, you got to get rid of that. You got to push that aside, because only then will you be able to chase after God with your whole heart. And so I guess what this is starting to see when you kind of combine all these together is that this new world is not about your status. It's not about your power. It's not about necessarily who you are. It's more about how your heart is. Is your heart chasing God? And I think that's an interesting to think about. And so this kind of is going to push us into our last section. And the last section is going to be basically us taking everything that we learned, everything from the last 4 videos, and we're going to put it into what does that mean for us today? What does that look like for us as Christians in today's context? How can we apply that information to what we're doing? But so the last question, if I were to answer the question that I gave you guys, is the kingdom of heaven is for, I would probably say is for the soft-hearted, the people that are not controlled by sin, the ones that chase God with their whole hearts, the ones that live life through humility, the ones that that are willing to give up everything for that priceless idea of the kingdom of heaven, the pricelessness of it. And I hope you guys can see that. I hope that's not too confusing. But anyway, so I guess the question I have for you guys today is, if you were to think about it in your own lives, what does money mean to you? Does it mean status? Does it mean power? Does it not mean anything to you? Does it separate us? Does it pull us from God? What does that look like? And then the next question is, what does it mean to approach God with humility? And so it's similar to the question I asked in the first week, but what does it mean to give up everything to chase after God? That nothing ties you down, not sin, not money, not power, not wealth. Nothing holds you back. What does that mean for you? Is it that important to you? That about wraps it up for today. Thank you so much for checking us out. Remember that it takes a lot to put everything on the line for Jesus, but I promise you it's worth it. Until next time, blessings to you.